Very good morning to you and welcome to another beautiful week. It's Monday and we're right in your face again. It became the convention for us here at Sook News Television, and we are reaching you live from the hub of Lagos Island. I am Oyinpreye Krumale. Good morning to you, Doctor. How was your weekend?
Well, a long one it is.
Long one?
It was a long week.
No, I thought my weekend was just like 2 hours.
It was a long one.
It was so quick. Like on Sunday, I was having a nap in the afternoon. I'm like, oh my God, tomorrow is over.
Saturday morning. But I think it's okay.
It is. Well, that's a good one coming from Doc here. And as usual, let's jump into insight on what made the news. There are several issues on the front burners this morning. In fact, we are even looking out to pick out the new ones or the most current ones that will be most beneficial for you, the Nigerian populace, the business community, the entrepreneur, the businessman, the businesswoman, the corporations and institutions of government, not just only locally, but also internationally. So let's begin with this. The federal civil servants have until February 17th, 2025 as deadline for identity verification on the portal of the Integrated Payroll and Personal Information System as the government moves to flush out ghost workers. I remember vividly the previous administration had a very strong battle with the Nigerian. I don't want to say the Nigerian Labour Congress, because even Labour, as a sister organization of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, were backing the ASU, who said we're not going to be part of this initiative. And they are giving the government reasons why they are not going to be part, and they were accusing the government that the government is trying to force them into it, and that the government spent lots of money in bringing the IPPIS and how the version of the Academic Staff Union of Universities is more proficient, more efficient, more important, and catered to the needs of the lecturers. I thought we've already gone past that stage. I'm surprised it's coming back again in this administration, Doc.
Well, I think it's just the nature of our people to embrace change. There are two issues for me here that are very germane. The first is change management.
Change management.
Yeah, because any time that a change is introduced, the champion of the change need deliberately to put a system in place to manage change, because change is something that people naturally resist. I remember the thesis of Kubler-Ross, who in his book In Death and Dying described how people react to the news of their death, especially when people who have gotten terminal ailment. That once the news is broken to them that this disease has occurred, the first stage is that these guys are shocked. And then, of course, it's followed by a phase of denial. And then you see depression sets in. And then, of course, they get to a point where they are negotiating. And then eventually we accept. So Kubler-Ross says, in change management, once change happens, this is a curve that people pass through. From immobilism, which is the shock, through denial, through depression, and then, of course, negotiation. And then they get to acceptance. And in each phase of this change, there's a need to program communication to address the phases, such that people understand, and we are dealing with human beings here. And I think this is what we're not doing well here. When we propose a change to a system, the communication is not strong enough by the change champions so that you can get a buy-in. I remember about 3 years ago, I was asking the NICDA DGA, why is it that there's so much resistance? What is it that the public is not aware of? And he told me then that, look, the challenge is that it's about the law of the federation, that as a civil servant, you cannot earn salary in 2 places from the government. And which, of course, was peculiar to us. That academic staff union of university, some of them have the privilege of going on sabbatical. And so the whole idea of sabbatical is that you are leaving your university and you are going to another university to go do sabbatical. So if you are captured on IPPIS in your primary university, and you are going to another federal university to do your sabbatical, if it's for 1 year, so which means your salary in your primary university is running, and your secondary university where you are doing your sabbatical, you are also supposed to be paid. Your name will have to be captured. And I said, but that was simple to resolve. That's a big issue. If they cannot earn from federal government in one side, can't we advise them to do their sabbatical either in state university or private university? So must it be in the federal institution? So a memo would have been sent out to them to look, because the law says you cannot earn in 2 places, and therefore you have to do your sabbatical in places where you don't need to do another biometric that's capturing you as a federal civil servant, which was simple enough. And that was the only basis really for the argument, because otherwise, other agencies of government, especially those in the Ministry of Health, doctors who were on call, who do all manners of hazard allowances, and that be programmed into IPPIS. So it came to see that it was only ASU that actually had that problem with IPPIS. And that is because they feel that some of their members were not getting as much as they are going to be receiving. So on that side, you find that communication was missing. And everybody is saying, oh, my money is deducted. And it was also obvious that because the money is coming straight from federal government account, your tax are taken at will. You don't even need to go and pay. Your pay, the government deducts it before the money gets to you. And some people today don't even want to pay their taxes also. So these are all the conversations that were around whether we should adopt IPPIS or not. So, but the challenge was the fact that they said, okay, why are we not integrating? As you say, oh, this one was developed by foreigners, so we can do our
before we go to that
our own local
version. I like that innovative side of the conversation. But before we go there, the previous issue you pointed out, that ASU, when they go on sabbatical, most especially lecturers, when they go on sabbatical, they equally go and serve that duration of time in another university, most especially in federal university. Some of the complaints we were getting from ASU members at that time were that though they are on sabbatical, and sometimes they even travel out of the country to go do their sabbatical in foreign universities, and the government was against that. Because you were mentioning that they could have done that in private universities or in state universities.
The government has never been against anybody going out to do sabbatical anywhere. And people are still...
And to continue to earn on both fronts.
No, that's not true. It's not true. That's not a true position. As long as it's not the federal government paying, government has no issues, because it's part of an academic culture that if you're teaching in the university environment, at certain points in your career, you should be able to interact with university in other places for peer review. So government is not against us going on sabbatical abroad. And government is not saying, oh, if you are on sabbatical, you cannot be paid. That's not what government is saying. What government is saying is that you cannot earn from 2 federal institutions. So even if you are going to go on sabbatical, maybe, for example, you are from the School of Agriculture, and then, of course, you want to do your sabbatical in a Rubber Research Institute in Benin, for example. Now, you may be moving from University of Benin to Rubber Research Institute, but both of them are federal agencies.
Okay.
So what it means is that the law says you can only earn in one place. So as long as you choose the proper research as your place for sabbatical, then you have to forfeit one of your earnings. So, and I said that for me is not a big deal really. So what should happen is that those who are planning to go on sabbatical, they should not be looking at
federal institutions.
Because it will be a conflict. It will mean as if you are earning in two places. Because of course it's your biometrics now. You know, but before the IPPIS came, it was easy for people to do this, and you would not just know because the university prepare your payroll and it's set. And this is actually at the heart of the conversation of what people term today as ghost worker syndrome. Although there's also another dimension and leg to it, where when universities are seeking accreditation, they also go to borrow lecturers.
Within the federal structure.
Yeah. So all these things are things that happens, and you know that you don't have the capacity to drive a course. And even private universities are doing that at the moment.
Okay.
So you're using people on the payroll of federal service and list them as your lecturer in the department just to scale through accreditation hurdles.
From the
So all these are the things that actually is affecting the system, and that's why the whole debate about IPPIS was the issue. Because I was asking the DJ, look, because the DJ said, look, they are not to let the people on IPPIS. All people are on IPPIS, and nobody is having the same issues that they are having. So because the issue they are having, they are legal issue. But who is telling the public or even telling or explaining to the academic staff union that this is what it is? And so, but in order to accommodate this, they have designed their own system. And now again, another problem was the fact that after they have designed their own system, they had to, the stress test has to be done on it, whether the system was going to be good.
I remember vividly.
And they said, okay, they have done their system. And of course, the user interface, which is the one program for bosses and all those things I talked to, say, oh, this is the best. This is good for them. But there's also another dimension to it, of course, which is the security dimension. Is it able to resist attacks? That if this is launched, will it be a sure proof that hackers will not attack it? Now, because we hear all this argument when at the time Masu said, oh, you see, NIDA said they passed the test.
Yes.
Now, but the question was, which test did they pass?
Yes, Doc. In fact, I, for one, when this back and forth commenced between the academic staff union of universities and the federal government, one part that was in the front burner of Nigerians, ASU was crying foul that the government is using, I don't want to say a stick and carrot measure, but just a stick measure to beat them in line. And they said on 2 occasions that the Nigerian Information Technology Development Agency, that's the NID that you talked about, carried out the assessment and the productivity test on the ASU app that they went to design on their own, that it failed the test. And ASU counted that failure, two times failure, as a way to beat them in line or to force them to use the IPPIS. However, one thing I want us to look at is that payment. They gave a very, very valid argument about the payment of lecturers when it comes to money. Before the military intervention in politics, the general in the Nigerian army and the professors of Nigerian Academic Staff Union, or I beg your pardon, Nigerian universities, their earnings were the same. After the intervention of the military, because the military now became exposed to political loot and political money, their salaries were changed because it doesn't have to go through parliament for consideration or for verification anymore. And we could remember very well that after we moved away from military administration to civilian administration, they maintained the status quo. And I can obviously say since time immemorial, Nigerian lecturers have been crying for the increase of salaries. You go to the universities, you see some of them as old as 65, approaching 70, still lecturing. And if you put side by side what the professor in the Nigerian university earns at the moment, or putting in place his purchasing power, how he can take care of his family when he when he retires from service, where is he going to live? Where is he going to stay, his house and all of that? And you compare that with the Nigerian general, even a colonel in the Nigerian army at the moment. You can't say these two people were peers some time ago in the economic perspective of Nigerians. What happened? Don't you think the lecturers have been shortchanged economically?
Yeah, I think there are two different perspectives to this issue. The first for me is the fact that, you see, lecturers and they are not doing the same job. And using them as basis for comparison, and I don't think that flies. And two, the lecturers and civil servants, they are not also on the same scale as we speak. So and I don't think the fact that there are disequilibrium in the way people earn, especially those who do different work, should actually be the argument. But here on the front is the fact that one of the things I also raised with some of my friends who are lecturers is the fact that, look, elsewhere in the world, lecturers don't depend on what government pay. Many of them rely on grants. And that is attracting funding to their universities. Here, we don't see fund coming to the university from these people who are actually doing serious research that industries are funding. I've not heard, and I don't know whether it exists, where you have maybe indigenous or even blue chip companies that are operating in Nigeria having chairs in our universities. But if you go to other climes, that's what you see. You see Apple having chairs in MIT, in major universities across America. And of course, by having a chair, it means that the burden of payment of that professor is not on the government, it's on the company. Because they're doing research that is going to actually impact society. We don't have that happening here. There are a whole lot of funding that is up there that people could access to do research and all of all that, and grants that comes to academic staff in other climes. And so they rely so much on grants to run the institutions. They have also raised the standard in those institutions to see that you have to be able to even attract foreign students who pay you in hard currency, and the system has enough resource. All those we don't have. And what is the argument? Yeah, people tell you and say, oh, because we're not paying, that's why we're not having quality. And I don't think so. I just feel that there's a way we can sanitize the system, but we're not talking about really the academic circle, but it's to understand that there are some certain people who you needed to get on certain level in terms of what their job requires. And these people, they are working and their structures are determined, and that negotiation is going. And even the funding of universities is okay, you can't increase school fees because you say, oh, education may be accessible to all, and which I don't think is really the case, because when you also look at it from that argument that everybody must go to university, then of course you have to also find out what really is the function of a universal education, which is supposed to be managerial. Then if everybody is a graduate, then who are we going to manage at the end of the day? Now, these are all challenges that, of course, the entire system is not looking at. So it's beyond what we're paying. It's also to see that if people can have a free primary or free secondary education, and I think that anybody who aspires to go into tertiary education must know that it's expensive. And so because we also must look at it, and I think it's even better off now with this system that the government has put in there a student loan that even if you have a student of the poor who is cerebral and is able to read, can actually gain admission, and then of course have to take the responsibility if that is the line that they want to toe. So those are all the arguments on the table. But on the issue of the IPPIS, and I think for me, it's one innovation that we cannot ignore. As long as we are having to get this thing working, if it's working for other civil servants, and I think it can work for any other party who earn money from government. But again, I don't know, why is it that I am your employer and then you are determining how I'm going to pay you?
Me. Okay, I know that's that was the core of the government argument, and Chris Ngige, who was the former Minister of Health, also had this conversation with the National Association of Resident Doctors, who then were looking at the GIFMIS platform to hold sway, and they were somehow contending with the system at that point in time that, look, the GIFMIS system stated this, that, and the other, and we don't think that the IPPIS actually put all this into consideration. Now, Doc, there is one fundamental issue mentioned in this specific story that we read about that has become a thorn in the flesh of the government, and most especially that has formed hole in the pocket of the government's treasury. During El-Rufai's administration, where he was the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, in his book, The Accidental Public Servant, there was a chapter there he dedicated, or where he was talking about how the reforms were done by the economic team of the Olusegun Obasanjo-led administration, how he himself, Mr. Charles Chukwuma Soludo, the current DG of the World Trade Organization, Madam Okonjo Ngozi-Iweala, and El-Rufai himself, and Ninadi Usman, and some others. He was talking about how government-owned establishment in the Federal Capital Territory, how it came and it cleaned the stables, referring to ghost workers, that some leaders in the government-owned institutions are well aware that some of their workers are late and they still left their name on the payroll to be receiving money. Others, you have fictitious names there inserted into the payroll, and when it comes, it goes straight to those who are overseeing the payment system in those government-owned establishments. He tend to, including the restaurants by government-owned enterprises, he mentioned the whole gamut of how monies were being frittered away through some illegal means. And indeed, ghost workers and that syndrome has taken a lot from the government system. If this IPPIS is going to be tackling that, that's one aspect that government across board, both in universities and other government institutions, should look at when implementing policies. What's your take on it?
Well, it's a big problem. A whole lot of things happen, and until you have to interact with some of these public servants, I see too many things happen. I remember I was having a training the last month, and we were having this conversation, and somebody was telling us a true life story of how a certain person was, you know, as you are looking for employment, you are carrying your CV everywhere. And the person was walking through the street of Abuja, and they saw where, do you want to work in the public service? Come in. You walk in with your CV, and then they do interview for you, collect all your details, and say you will hear from them. And this person is actually employed. But he's not aware, because nobody has reached out to him to say, you have been employed. Until one day he eventually got an opportunity and somebody helped him to enter into public service. Now, to go and do biometrics, they discovered that he was already listed on the IPPIS. Oh, yes. So, and And this guy that said, they're not asking, you have been on IPPIS. So he said because he had gotten the information that those things happened. So he actually was now had to take this guy into the office to ask him questions. I said, have you been in this place before to go
search for job?
Search for job. And he said, yes. So I said, he laughed and laughed and laughed. See, because that thing could have taken him to jail. I said, well, you have been enrolled on the IPPIS. So that day they took your biometrics and take everything and say you are waiting for the job. Somebody had actually programmed. Now, that's the criminality you see sometimes within the system. And this is perpetrated by people that, of course, you have as insider within the system who breaches the system, abuse the laws. And that's why I keep saying we cannot talk about how good a nation can be when we don't address this issue of the heart of some people who make every effort to beat any system that you put in place. No matter how solid the system is, people are working hard night and day to see how to breach it so that it can be for their benefit. So the symptom of ghost worker is just something that is way, way, way overboard, that these are deliberately done. Government makes attempts every time to clean the system, but the system is not cleaning. And this is the reason because we're not in e-government. And then, of course, you talk about the situation where you have people who are dead.
Yes.
And they are out of service. And at the end of the day, proper documentations are not done by the agencies involved to say that this person is dead and we are removing this person from our payroll. So whether by accident or by default, you find that the name is still there even after he was dead.
And still collecting salary. Why is a dead man or a dead woman?
Some years ago, I have a brother of mine who was removed from the police force. He was serving in Lagos here. 10 years after, signal of his transfer was coming from Abuja that he was being moved to Maiduguri. So they said, oh, you have been in police force even when the police force had dismissed you. Yeah. Because the system we operate is analog. And people are resisting any innovations that is digital, which make it very easy that once something happens and it is recorded, it goes through the system all at once without somebody needing to carry file from one office to another, to another, to another. And then, of course, this thing is automatic at the click of a button. And so whatever entitlement that these people have, you pay it out at once. That's why you see that even when people have finished serving the nation, they have to go through the process of verification, because all we do is analog, and we have refused to embrace technology to solve most of our problems. And I think that if we must make progress, we have to deliberately embrace technology. Fighting really don't solve issues like we have seen. I was going to mention that because I remember speaking also the DG for Bureau for Public Service Reform, who mentioned to me once that he wrote several letters to Academic Staff of Union because of this, so that we can talk about it, and they never honor any of it. So this is the challenge you have in the system, where some people feel that they are so powerful or they have connect with the system, and therefore all that will happen is that they must have their way. And I think that if people write an application to say, I beg to apply, then they must be willing to obey the rules of engagement that your employer has every right and authority to negotiate and to determine how you should be paid. Because the question here is not what you are being paid. The question is what channel should be used.